Welcome back to my video. Next video I'm doing about Spartans, the average Avenger of Leonidas. If you remember the movie Spartan, King Leonidas, well, the truth, what they did to the Persians, yeah, they did the truth. The Persians tried to bury what they happened and everything. Well, let's read some of the comments. Our arrows will block out the sun. Good, then we shall fight in the shade. Come and take them. And 25,000 years later, American general gave an even more curt answer when his surrender was demanded in the Argos at the Battle of Bulge Nuts. Give them nothing, take from them everything. Thank you for getting the numbers right, though. This was way better than the Hollywood movie. Subscribe. My mother's village is in from tablets and everything I visit Greece, I remember them. Okay. Wow. Okay, let's go ahead and get to the video, shall we? Get all this ads and shit out of the way. Okay, here we go.
It is the
Enjoy.
third dawn, combing his hair. He is a Spartan, perhaps 30, perhaps 50. At this distance it is impossible to tell. His bronze helmet sits beside him in the dust. His hands work slowly through long black hair, oiled and braided, as if he were preparing for a wedding instead of a slaughter. Around him 300 others do the same. They stretch, they lace sandals, they check the edges of short iron swords. Somewhere down the pass, beyond the rebuilt stone wall, the largest army the world has ever seen is forming up to kill them. In a few hours, almost every man combing his hair on this small Greek hillside will be dead, behind a single Persian king. An empire stretching from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea is about to throw itself one more time into a strip of dust roughly 20 meters wide. By the time the sun reaches its highest point, the Greeks will be fighting with broken spears, then with swords, then, according to the man who wrote it all down, with their hands and with their teeth. The Spartan king who leads them has marched his men nearly 400 kilometers in late summer heat to die in this exact spot. To put that in human terms, that is the distance from New York City to Pittsburgh, on foot, in armor, knowing the end of the road is a grave. But here is what the legend never quite explains. Sparta, the most militarized society in the Greek world, a city whose entire existence was organized around producing soldiers, sent only 300 men to defend all of Greece. 300, out of an army of thousands. Why? The textbook answer is that they were elite. The real answer is darker, stranger, and tied to a religious festival that almost no one mentions when they tell this story. And there is a second mystery that Persian records for 2,500 years have quietly refused to acknowledge. The man who destroyed Leonidas at Thermopylae was not Xerxes. It was not a Persian general. It was a Greek. And what Greece did to avenge Leonidas, what they did to the empire that mutilated his body, is a story Persia has spent millennia trying to bury. If you are fascinated by the untold stories of history's most decisive battles, hit that like button and subscribe for more epic war content. Now, let me take you back to the summer of 480 BCE, to a narrow pass on the Greek coast, and to a king who already knew he was not coming home. The man combing his hair has a name we do not know. The man who orders him to die we do. Leonidas is roughly 60 years old. That is the first thing the legend gets wrong. The hero of Thermopylae is not a young warrior king in his prime. He is an aging man with a wife named Gorgo, a young son named Pleistarchus, and a crown he never expected to wear. Leonidas became king of Sparta only because his older half-brother Cleomenes died without a male heir. Died, in fact, under circumstances that Sparta itself preferred not to discuss. Leonidas inherited a throne by accident, and now he is marching toward a grave on purpose. In late summer of 480 BCE, he leads 300 Spartiates out of Sparta. He does not lead an army. Sparta could field thousands. He leads what the Spartans call a royal bodyguard. And here is the answer to the first mystery. The Spartan religious calendar forbade military campaigns during the festival of the Carnea. The full army could not march, but a king's personal escort, that was a loophole. So Leonidas chose 300 men with one specific qualification beyond their skill. Every one of them had a living son. He was selecting men whose family lines would survive their deaths. He was choosing a force designed to be destroyed. Coming the other way is something Greece has never seen. Xerxes I, son of Darius, is 38 years old. He has spent...
Hotels.com introduces Save Your Way. Choose how you save. Take instant savings now or bank as rewards for a future trip. Save Your Way. It's exactly what it sounds like, unlike headphones. Save Your Way, only at Hotels.com. Hotels.com, it's all in the name.
Ants. They aren't afraid of sprays. Use Taro liquid ant bait. Ants are attracted to the bait and take it back to the nest to share, killing the queen and wiping out the colony. Taro, smarter than ants and roaches.
Spent 4 years preparing this invasion, not for conquest, but for revenge. His father lost at Marathon a decade earlier. Xerxes intends to erase the insult, but the men he leads are not a single people. They are Persians, Medes, Scythians, Phoenicians, Egyptians, Indians, Lydians, Bactrians. Many are conscripts dragged hundreds of miles from villages in Central Asia, marched through mountains hungry and frightened, fighting not for an idea, but because the king's officers stand behind them with whips. They have wives too. They have sons. Most of them will die in a country whose name they cannot pronounce. Years earlier, when a Persian noble named Hydarnes told a group of Greek envoys they would be happier as subjects of the great king, the envoys answered him with a single sentence: "You have never tasted freedom. You do not know how sweet it is." That exchange is the war in miniature. Two ways of seeing the world marching toward each other through a pass barely wide enough for a wagon. Leonidas does not arrive alone. By the time the Spartan column reaches Thermopylae in early August, other Greek contingents are already converging. From the south come more Peloponnesians. From central Greece come the Thespians, the Phocians, the Locrians. From Boeotia come the Thebans, and we will return to them because nothing about the Thebans is simple. The total Greek force assembled at Thermopylae numbers approximately 7,000 hoplites, not 300. 7,000, the 300, is a fragment of a larger story, a true fragment, but a fragment. These 7,000 men come from a dozen different cities, speaking the same language with different accents, worshipping the same gods with different rituals. And almost all of them know that some of the cities to the north have already surrendered to Persia. They are not a unified nation. They are a coalition of arguments held together by one shared belief, that the alternative is worse. Among the 7,000, 3 contingents will matter most. The 300 Spartans you already know. With them, uncounted in the famous number, march Helots, slave-class attendants who will fight as light infantry and die without their names recorded anywhere. Then there are the 700 Thespians under a commander named Demophilus. Thespiae is a small Boeotian city. It is not a warrior society. Its citizens are farmers and craftsmen who will leave behind fields half-harvested. They have come because they believe Persian rule means the end of everything they have built. Demophilus has brought what amounts to the entire fighting-age male population of his city. There is no reserve. There is no second force back home. If the 700 die, Thespiae will not produce another generation of soldiers for 100 years. And there are 400 Thebans. Their presence is awkward. Thebes is suspected, correctly, of leaning toward Persia. Herodotus claims these 400 came as hostages, sent under pressure to prove Theban loyalty. Whether that is fair or anti-Theban bias, no Greek who watches them deploy that morning is entirely sure they will fight. But here is what should stop you cold. While Persian scouts watched from a ridge above the pass, they saw the Spartans doing something inexplicable. The men were stripped to the waist. They were exercising. They were combing their hair. Xerxes himself, when this was reported, did not believe it. He called for a Greek exile in his court and demanded an explanation. The exile told him, "When Spartans groom their hair, it means they are preparing to die." That is the moment Xerxes understood he was not facing a normal enemy. The pass itself is the second character in this story. Thermopylae means hot gates, named for the sulfur springs that bubble out of the rock and give the whole area a faint smell of struck matches. In 480 BCE, the sea comes much closer to the cliffs than it does today. The road from Thessaly into central Greece is squeezed into a corridor perhaps 15 to 20 meters wide at its narrowest point. A few hundred meters of fighting ground between mountain and water. Leonidas finds an old, half-collapsed stone wall built by the Phocians generations earlier. He orders his men to rebuild it. They work in the heat, stacking stones, knowing that they are constructing the front edge of their own tomb. But there is one weakness in the position: a mountain path. A goat track called the Anopeia, winding 8 to 10 kilometers through wooded heights emerging behind the pass. Leonidas knows about it. He sends 1,000 Phocian troops to guard it. He believes this is enough. It will not be enough. Before the first arrow is loosed, Xerxes sends a herald. The man rides up to the Greek position alone, the way heralds did in the ancient world, under the protection of custom older than Persia itself. He carries a message and a choice. Lay down your weapons, the great king offers, and you will be spared, more than spared, rewarded, made satraps of Greek land.
I needed some inspiration for how to wear them, so I asked ChatGPT to help me. It was so useful to brainstorm how to wear them for different occasions like work, going out, running errands, and date night.
I'm John Morgan, and this is my family. More than 35 years ago, my wife Ultima and I started our firm with the simple goal to fight for families like yours.
What began as a small firm is now America's largest. But to us, it's always been more than just a business.
It's a family business.
We understand what it means to face hard
Lands. Given gold, given honor, all you have to do is surrender the spears. The Greek officers are watching. The Thespians are watching. The Thebans, especially the Thebans, are watching. Whatever Leonidas says next will travel down the line in minutes. It will travel to Thebes, to Athens, to Sparta. It will define what the next 3 days mean. Leonidas, 60 years old, an aging king who became king by his brother's death, looks at the herald, and he gives an answer of 2 words, molon labe, come and take them. Whether he literally said it in exactly those syllables, historians have argued for 2,500 years. Herodotus does not record it. The phrase is preserved by Plutarch, writing centuries later. But the emotional truth of the moment is beyond dispute. A Spartan king, given the chance to save his own life and the lives of his men by laying down 2 pieces of bronze and wood, refused, not with a speech, not with a prayer, with 2 words that carried inside them everything Sparta had ever taught its sons about what made a life worth living. The herald rode away. The wall was finished. The 7,000 took their positions, and the largest army in the world began to move. For 4 days, nothing happened. Then, on the 5th day, Xerxes ran out of patience. 4 days. That is how long Xerxes waited. 4 days while his army stretched back along the road from Thessaly, an unbroken column of men and horses and oxen and supply wagons reaching toward the horizon. 4 days during which his scouts crept forward to observe the Greeks and came back with the strange story of the hair combing. 4 days during which he was certain, completely certain, that this absurd little force of 7,000 would lose its nerve and slip away in the night. They did not slip away. On the morning of the 5th day, Xerxes sat down on a portable throne carried by his attendants, had it placed on a slope where he could see the entire pass, and gave the order, "Send in the Medes." Behind the advancing Medes, Persian officers carried whips. Herodotus is precise about this. Whips. Men were being driven into the killing ground because their own commanders did not trust them to advance willingly. Stop and picture that. The largest army on earth, the legions of the great King of Kings, and the men in the front ranks had to be lashed forward like cattle. That is what it looked like from the Greek side of the wall. The Medes hit the Greek line at a run. They were good soldiers, disciplined, well-armed, veterans of campaigns from Egypt to Bactria. They were also wearing wicker shields against bronze, scale armor against 8-foot iron spear points, and they were attacking uphill into a corridor barely wide enough for a dozen of them to fight abreast. The phalanx held. The phalanx did more than hold. It absorbed the charge, locked shields, and pushed back. The front rank stabbed downward with the long dory spear. The second rank stabbed over their shoulders. When a Greek went down, the man behind him stepped forward, and the line closed without breaking. The Medes died in heaps, their bodies piled in front of the wall until the men behind were climbing over their own dead to reach the Spartans. For hours, this continued, wave after wave. Xerxes watched from his slope. According to Herodotus, the king leapt from his throne 3 times, in shock, in anger, in disbelief that this absurd little force of Greeks was butchering his elite troops without apparently losing anyone of their own. So Xerxes sent in the Immortals. This was his answer to everything. 10,000 picked soldiers, the standing professional corps of the Achaemenid army, called Immortals because their number was always maintained at exactly 10,000. Every casualty replaced instantly so that the unit, in name, never shrank. They marched forward late in the day in good order, expecting to do what the Medes could not, and they ran into the same wall of bronze. Worse, Leonidas had begun using a trick. The Spartans would suddenly turn and run, as if their nerve had broken. The Persians would surge after them, the formation breaking apart in pursuit, and then the Spartans would wheel around in perfect unison and reform the phalanx, slaughtering the men who had been chasing them moments before. It worked. It worked repeatedly. The Immortals broke against the line, just as the Medes had broken, and by sunset of the first day, the pass was carpeted with Persian dead and not yet meaningfully reduced in Greeks. Xerxes spent that night in his tent. We do not know what he said. We know what he did. He sent his men forward again the next morning. The same plan, the same result. It was on this second day that a local Greek, a man from the town of Trachis, ran up to a group of Spartans with what he thought was terrifying news. The Persian archers, he told them, were so numerous that when they loosed their arrows, the sky itself would go dark, the sun would be blotted
If you got hit
out. One of the Spartans, a man named Dionysus, looked at him without expression and answered, "So much the better. We shall fight in the shade." That sentence has outlived empires. It has outlived the Persian language as it existed in 480 BCE. It has outlived almost every name and place mentioned in this video. And it was spoken casually by a man who would be dead within 48 hours. By the evening of the second day, Xerxes was facing catastrophe. His best troops had failed. His morale was cracking. The pass had not yielded a single meter. And then a Greek walked into his camp. His name was Ephialtes. He was a local Malian, a peasant by most accounts, who knew the mountains around Thermopylae the way only a man born on them can. He went to Xerxes, hoping to receive some great reward from the king, Herodotus tells us. And he told the Persian command something they did not know. There was a path, a goat track, the Anapir, winding through the wooded heights above the pass. 8 to 10 kilometers of difficult terrain. It came out behind the Greek position. If a force could move along it in darkness, it could appear at dawn in the Greek rear, and the entire defense would collapse. Xerxes did not hesitate. He turned to Hydarnes, the noble commanding the Immortals, and gave the order, "Take your men. Take this Greek. March now. Be in position by dawn." The name Ephialtes in Greek became a common noun. It came to mean nightmare. For 2,500 years, no Greek parent has named their child Ephialtes. The man who destroyed Leonidas was not Persian. He was not even a soldier. He was a neighbor. That night, while the Greeks slept behind their wall and Xerxes paced in his tent, Hydarnes led his picked force up into the mountains. The path was narrow and overgrown. Branches snagged on armor. The men moved in single file, with Ephialtes guiding them. The wind through oak leaves made it difficult to hear, which was both a curse and a blessing. They could not be heard, but they could not hear what might be waiting for them. What was waiting for them was the 1,000 Phocians Leonidas had placed there. The Phocians woke at the sound of footsteps. They scrambled into formation and made a decision that would prove catastrophic. They retreated to higher ground, assuming the Persians were coming specifically for them and that the high ground would give them defensive advantage. The Persians were not coming for them. The Persians barely paused. Hydarnes loosed a single volley of arrows up the slope to keep the Phocians' heads down, then continued along the path. Within an hour they were gone, descending toward the rear of the Greek main position. The Phocians, frightened and confused, did not send a runner. No one warned Leonidas. By the time the king learned what had happened, it was nearly dawn. By the time the sun rose on the third day, Leonidas understood that the battle was already lost. The only question that remained was how he would lose it. A runner had reached the wall before first light. The Phocians were broken. Persian elite infantry, thousands of them, were coming down the back of the mountain. In perhaps 2 or 3 hours they would be in position to attack the Greek rear. Leonidas called a council of the allied commanders. What was said in that council is not preserved word for word. What was decided is, most of the 7,000 were to leave immediately. Now, they were to withdraw south while the road was still open and carry the warning to Athens, to the Peloponnese, to every Greek city that had not yet committed. The war was bigger than this pass. The army that survived to fight tomorrow mattered more than the army that died today. But Leonidas himself, with his 300, would remain. He had no choice. Spartan law forbade retreat. To leave the field alive was to lose his citizenship, his honor, his name. He had marched here knowing this. He had selected men with living sons knowing this. But he did not order anyone else to die with him. Most of the contingents accepted the dismissal. The Locrians left. The Phocians on the mountain were already gone. The Arcadians and Corinthians and the other Peloponnesians marched south, many of them weeping, none of them looking back. Within an hour, the Greek force had shrunk to a fraction of what it had been the night before. 2 contingents refused to leave. The 400 Thebans stayed, though whether by choice or because Leonidas held them as hostages to ensure their city's loyalty, Herodotus is not certain. And the 700 Thespians under Demophilus stayed. They were not Spartans. They were not professional soldiers. They were farmers from a city of perhaps 3,000 citizens, and they made the decision that the 700 of them would die rather than abandon Leonidas. There is no surviving record of why. There is no speech. There is only the fact of what they did. Leonidas made one final decision. He moved his men out from behind the rebuilt wall, forward, into more open ground. The reasoning was cold and clear. Behind the wall, the killing zone was narrow, but the Greeks could only kill so many at once. In open ground, they could attack rather than defend, and they could kill more Persians before they themselves were overwhelmed. The point was no longer to hold the pass. The point was to make the Persians pay the highest possible price for taking it. The Spartans formed in front, the Thespians on one flank, the Thebans behind, and Leonidas led them forward into the dust. This is the moment in every retelling when the legend takes over. The truth is grimmer and more impressive than the legend. The Persians came at them from the front in a great mass. No longer Medes, no longer just immortals, but everything Xerxes could throw forward. The Greeks fought with the long Dory spear until the Dory spears began to splinter against shields and armor. Then they drew the Xiphos, the short iron sword, and they fought hand to hand, the pass filled with screaming. Persian officers, still using whips, drove their men into the killing ground. Greek hoplites moved as a single organism, the phalanx contracting and expanding, killing methodically. Look at one Spartan's hands. The leather grip of his shield is dark with sweat. His knuckles are split where a Persian sword has glanced off the bronze. His spear broke 20 minutes ago, and the splintered shaft is still in his left fist because he has not had a free second to drop it. He is breathing through his mouth because the dust has coated his nose and throat. He does not know that his king has just been killed. 40 meters to his right. He will know in about 30 seconds. He will fight for another 7 minutes after that. Leonidas died somewhere in the first hour of the open ground fight. Herodotus is brief about it. He was struck down almost certainly by Persian arrows fired from beyond spear range. The Spartans saw him fall, and what they did next is one of the most extraordinary things in the historical record. They went and got the body. They drove forward through the Persian line, 300 men against thousands, and physically fought their way to where their king lay. They lifted him. They carried him back. Herodotus says the struggle over the body of Leonidas was one of the most savage moments of the entire battle. 4 separate Persian assaults, 4 times beaten back, until the Spartans had their king. They retreated with him toward the wall, leaving a path of dead behind them. And then Hydarnes arrived. The Persian flanking force emerged from the back of the mountain into the Greek rear, and the trap closed. From the front, Xerxes' main army surged forward. From behind, the Immortals came down the slopes. The Greeks were now in a shrinking pocket between 2 enemies, in dust thick enough to make breathing painful, with the body of their king at the center of their formation. Across the field on his slope, Xerxes was watching. Herodotus tells us he leapt from his throne again, this time not in anger, but in something closer to disbelief. After 3 days, after thousands of his finest soldiers dead, the small Greek force was still fighting.
Saving money feels right. Just like when things are packed tidy and tight. Get auto insurance that fits your budget and your needs. Save up to 10% when you bundle auto and renter's insurance. Get a quote today. USAA.
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform made for anyone with an idea and a drive to bring it to life. Describe what you want and watch it take shape. You can plan, customize, and expand in any direction. From tools built for one to platforms ready for many. From passion projects to enterprise-grade systems. Everything is built in and ready to launch. It's a new world of creation, where you can go as far as your imagination takes you. Can you imagine it? Let's make your dream a reality, right now.
Was still organized, was still killing. The great King of Kings, ruler of an empire that stretched across 3 continents, sat back down on a portable chair on a Greek hillside and watched a handful of men refuse to die on his schedule. The Spartans and Thespians fell back together. Demophilus's 700 fought beside the king's 300 without any apparent distinction. Boeotian farmer beside Spartan citizen, dying in the same minute, in the same dust. They retreated step by step toward a small mound near the rebuilt wall, a hillock now called Kolonos. The Thebans, somewhere in this phase, made their own decision. They threw down their shields. They raised their hands. They surrendered. Herodotus says they were taken prisoner and branded by the Persians as slaves. Whether this is accurate or anti-Theban propaganda is one of the unresolved questions of the battle. But of the 400 Thebans who had marched to Thermopylae, perhaps 350 surrendered alive. The Spartans and Thespians did not surrender. They reached the Kolonos hill. They formed a circle around Leonidas's body. Their swords were broken. Their shields were splintered. They were perhaps a few hundred men by this point, exhausted past human endurance, and they were entirely surrounded. Xerxes did not order an infantry assault. He had learned. He had learned across 3 days what these men could do when bronze met bronze. He gave a different order. The archers were brought forward, thousands of them ringing the small hill on every side, and they began to shoot. This is the moment Herodotus describes in language that has never been matched. The Greeks on the Kolonos hill, with their weapons broken or lost, defended themselves with swords if they still had them, and then with hands and with teeth. They did not break. They did not throw down their arms. They stood in the rain of Persian arrows, and they died standing in a tight knot around the body of their king, killing any man who came too close until they had nothing left to kill with. When the last man fell, there was a moment of silence. Not a long one, but there was a moment on a hot August morning in 480 BCE, when the loudest army in the world stood looking at a hill covered in bodies and did not know what to say. The arrows stopped, the shouting stopped, the trampling of advancing feet stopped, and for perhaps 30 seconds the only sound at Thermopylae was the wind off the Aegean coming through the pass that the Persians had finally taken, and the faint hiss of the sulfur springs that had given the place its name. Dionysus had died somewhere on that hill, fighting, as he had promised, in the shade. Demophilus had died with his Thespians around him, having lost everything his city could lose, its harvest, its soldiers, its future. And Leonidas, 60 years old, an aging king who had marched 400 kilometers to die exactly here, lay at the center of the pile of bronze and iron and broken bone. The Persians took the hill. They walked through the bodies. They stripped the dead. And then Xerxes himself, the great king, the king of kings, the ruler of an empire stretching from India to the Aegean, came to look at the corpse of Leonidas. What he did next is the moment the war turned. He ordered the body of the Spartan king cut. He ordered the head removed and set on a spike. He ordered what remained of the body crucified on a wooden frame at the edge of the pass. Persians did not do this. Persians did not mutilate enemy kings. It was, in Achaemenid culture, deeply taboo, a violation of religious law as well as military custom. The fact that Xerxes ordered it tells us something the Persian inscriptions never recorded. He was not triumphant. He was incandescent. The 3 days at the hot gates had broken something in him, and he expressed it by desecrating a corpse in a way his own priests must have flinched.
Oh, it's you! Mr. Owl, why do chameleons change color? Because they're enjoying every delicious and chahooey flavor of Tootsie Roll. So, how do you pick a favorite flavor? Let's find out.
How do you pick a favorite flavor of Tootsie Roll? The world may never know.
Wondering what could trigger an IRS audit? We'll break down audits in this edition of Tax Tips by TurboTax. Taxpayers often wonder if filing an amended return just to change their filing status might lead to an IRS audit. The good news is that amending a return isn't unusual and doesn't raise any red flags with the IRS. The IRS actually encourages you to correct mistakes, so don't let fear of an audit stop you from amending your return if you need to. But how does the IRS decide which tax return to audit? There are several factors that could trigger an IRS audit of your return. Let's look at 3 common reasons. 1. The IRS compares your return to a random sample of returns from similar taxpayers. If something seems unusual, you may be selected for an audit. 2. The IRS receives copies of your W-2 and 1099 forms. So, if the income you report on your return doesn't match what's reported on those forms, you may be selected for an audit. And 3. Reporting transactions with business partners, investors, or other taxpayers whose returns were also selected for audit could lead to your return being audited as well. Keep in mind that your chances of being audited are relatively low. as less than 1% of tax returns are selected to be audited. And if you're amending your return to only change your filing status, you can minimize your chances of an audit by providing a thorough explanation for the change. The IRS will generally process the amendment and accepts the change if you are eligible to use the new filing status and could have used it on your original return. However, the IRS doesn't allow changing your filing status from married filing jointly to married filing separately after the tax deadline. So you've been selected for a tax audit. Now what? Remember that an audit is simply a review of your return. If you've accurately reported your income, deductions, filing status, and other items on your return, you have nothing to worry about. But for more peace of mind, you can get one-on-one audit guidance from an experienced tax professional through the TurboTax Audit Support Guarantee. Or you can purchase TurboTax Audit Defense for additional representation in case of a tax audit. Visit TurboTax.com for more info to help you file your taxes with confidence.
To witness, it would prove to be the worst political decision of his life. Because the story of Thermopylae does not end at Thermopylae, it ends at Salamis, and then at Plataea, and in the answer Greece gave to what Xerxes did to Leonidas's body. When the dust settled at Thermopylae, the count was this. Approximately 1,000 Greeks were dead on the field. The 300 Spartans, the 700 Thespians, an unknown number of Helots, and the Thebans who had fought before their comrades surrendered. The pass and the hill were covered with their bodies. Most of the 7,000 original defenders survived because Leonidas had dismissed them in time. Those survivors were already on the road south, carrying the story. Persian losses are harder to count. Herodotus claims 20,000, which is almost certainly inflated. Modern historians estimate somewhere between 2,000 and 10,000 Persian dead across the 3 days, a stunning ratio given the size of the attacking force, and a number that included a remarkable percentage of noble officers. Xerxes had spent his elite to take a corridor of dust 20 meters wide, and the empire had felt every death. The 400 Thebans, most of them, were alive. They had surrendered. Persian soldiers branded them, physically, with hot iron, as slaves of the great king. Many were sent back to Thebes. Their reception there is not recorded, but it is not difficult to imagine. The runners who carried the news to Athens arrived within days. Athens was already in panic. The Greek fleet had fought the Persians to a draw at Artemisium, in the strait just off Thermopylae, but with the pass lost, the navy could no longer hold its position. The fleet withdrew. The land north of Athens lay open. The Athenian assembly, by majority vote, made the most painful decision in the city's history. They abandoned Athens. They evacuated everyone, old men, women, children, to the island of Salamis and to nearby ports. They left the city itself, the Acropolis, the temples, the homes of every Athenian, undefended. Xerxes marched south. He took Athens. He burned the Acropolis. The temples on the hill, the ones the Athenians had built to celebrate the victory at Marathon a decade earlier, went up in smoke that could be seen from the evacuation ships in the bay. The Greeks, who had been dismissed from Thermopylae, the Arcadians, the Corinthians, the Locrians, went home to their families that autumn. We have no record of what they said. We have no letters, no speeches, no preserved conversations. But for the next 2,500 years, in Greek villages and Greek schools and Greek churches, what those men told their children that winter became the bedrock of how Greece remembered itself. We did not stay. The king stayed. The king and the 700 from Thespiae. We left because he ordered us to leave. We left so that there could be a Greece left to leave to. A few weeks after Athens burned, the Persian fleet sailed into the narrow strait between the mainland and the island of Salamis. The Athenian general Themistocles had drawn them in. He had sent Xerxes a false message suggesting the Greek fleet was about to break apart, that now was the moment to attack. Xerxes, still raging from Thermopylae, still convinced of his own destiny, believed it. He ordered his fleet into the strait. He had a throne carried up to a hillside overlooking the water so that he could watch his victory. He watched a catastrophe. The Persian ships, jammed into a narrow waterway, could not maneuver. The Greek triremes, smaller, faster, captained by men who had been waiting for this exact moment, rammed them. Hundreds of Persian vessels were destroyed in a single afternoon. The fleet that had ferried supplies for the largest army in the world was finished as a fighting force. Xerxes, watching from his hillside, watched the war turn against him in a few hours. He left Greece soon after. He left a general, Mardonius, with the bulk of the land army to finish what he had started. He himself crossed back into Asia.
Spectrum Internet con fibra óptica. Es el internet más rápido con la velocidad que necesitas. Es todo lo que importa.
He never returned. The next summer, in 479 BCE, the Spartans came north. This time, they did not come with 300 men. They came with 5,000 Spartiates, the largest Spartan army ever fielded outside the Peloponnese. And behind them came the rest of Greece, Athenians, Corinthians, Megarians, Thespians rebuilding from the ash of their burned city. Tens of thousands of hoplites marching to find the Persian army on the plains of Plataea. When they found them, the battle was not close. The Greek phalanx, the same formation, the same tactics, the same discipline that had killed Persians for 3 days at Thermopylae, did what it had been designed to do, now multiplied by 10. Mardonius died on the field. The Persian army was annihilated. The invasion of Greece ended on the plain at Plataea, almost exactly 1 year after Leonidas had been killed. Sparta had paid back what Xerxes did at the Hot Gates, with interest. What happened to Ephialtes is a small footnote, but it matters. He did not receive the reward Xerxes had promised him. The Persian fortunes collapsed before payment was ever made. He fled into the Greek interior, hunted. The Amphictyonic League, the religious council of the Greek city-states, placed a price on his head. He survived in exile for several years before he was killed by a fellow Greek over what Herodotus describes as an unrelated personal dispute. The man who destroyed Leonidas died for a private quarrel, with no statue, no song, no memorial. Only his name. Used to frighten children, this is the part of the story Persia tried to bury. The Achaemenid royal inscriptions, the ones carved at Persepolis, at Nakhche Rustam, at Susa, list his conquests. They list the peoples who serve him. They do not mention Thermopylae. They do not mention Salamis. They do not mention Plataea. Officially, in Persia's own record of itself, the war against the Greeks did not happen. The mutilation of Leonidas's body did not happen. The invasion that bankrupted the imperial treasury and broke the prestige of the great king did not happen. But there is a deeper burial than that. The story Greece told about itself, the story of the heroic 300, the warrior king, the lone Spartan stand, buried something too. It buried the 700 Thespians. It buried Demophilus, a name almost no one outside academic history has ever heard. It buried the Helots who died beside their masters and were not counted. It buried the Phocians and the Locrians and the Arcadians who marched south on Leonidas's order and lived with that decision the rest of their lives. The legend of 300 required everyone else to disappear. Here is the fact most people do not know. At the modern monument at Thermopylae, there are 2 statues. One is Leonidas, with the inscription Molon Labe, come and take them. Most visitors photograph this one and leave. The second statue, smaller and off to the side, was not erected until 1997, more than 2,400 years after the battle. It commemorates the 700 Thespians, For nearly the entire span of recorded Western history, the Thespian sacrifice had no monument. The Spartans were so successful at mythologizing their own role that the city which lost its entire